I suppose retirement is one area that throws a big curveball. Then I suppose moving country. And if you're doing both, if you're moving country and retiring, it's almost a double whammy in a way. Yeah, that purpose that people seek. It's often a tricky conversation I have with people.
The expectation would be, to meet people, to walk around the streets, the French lifestyle, grab a coffee and croissant. But when you do this by yourself, you do this once or twice, but it doesn't fill your whole day.
That 30-minute trip to the boulangerie is only 30 minutes of your day, isn't it?
Yes, there are expectations and there's a reality. So for someone coming, as a spouse or as a retiree and expecting to meet many people, it's not necessarily the case. People are busy with their own lives. So that can be tricky. Building confidence also that you can achieve something. If you prepare, if you do some thinking, you can find so many ideas for your life project. What's my life project, my purpose in life, individually and also as a couple.
Whether you're retiring to France or relocating for work, moving countries often changes far more than just your address. And today we're going to talk about the emotional side, which people rarely prepare for. So today's guest is Mathilde Baudu, and she helps people who are looking to move to France in terms of the whole process. So the emotional side, the relocation side, and much more. Welcome, Mathilde. How are you today?
Thank you, Mike. Hi, very good. Thank you. Thank you for welcoming me into your podcast.
No, not at all. Absolute pleasure to have you. We had a chat a couple of weeks ago and found out all about how you help clients who are in France or are thinking about moving to France. So just give us a brief explanation of your services, who you help, and how it's been going over the past few years.
Sure. Happy in France facilitates the integration of international professionals and athletes. Well, basically anyone coming, from a foreign country, moving into France. I'm based in Toulouse, near Toulouse in Colomiers, but we do work, all around France. Based on my experience, I noticed that integration into France can be tricky. These expectations and the reality, we'll talk about that, of course, but it can be a bit more difficult. So we'll help them on linguistic, cultural, and also personal sides. Yeah, we make sure that the first month of the integration is well supported.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's always that first month or two that's the tricky part.
It is.
What's the tricky things that you see most in those first few weeks?
The first few weeks are quite busy with logistics, moving and school for the kids and so on, or, moving and discovering the village or the city. But the tricky part is when the routine, sets and there's, you don't have a social life or there's a language barrier. People are often overwhelmed, by the difficulty of understanding everyday French. Even people who studied French before on apps or books or at school, they often find it so different, from what they studied. Everyday French is a whole different language, so it can be quite hard, to apprehend. It's very difficult and it leads to, lack of confidence, So it's basically the first weeks are very hard on all expats,
The honeymoon period, I think, is the best phrase, isn't it?
I love this,
all the new things and all the shiny things. And then, like you say, when routine sets in, those start to fade a little. And where you've been an expat yourself, so you've lived around the world. Tell us
Yes,
a bit about yourself.
Yes, I'm originally from the Paris area. I was born near Paris and spent all my childhood and teenage years. And I moved to the US first as an au pair just to, improve my English when I was 19. And I eventually, ended living abroad 14 years. So after 5 years in the US, in Ohio, I actually followed my husband to Puerto Rico. He was on mobility, so I followed him for his career opportunities, and then we moved to Brazil. So overall we spent 6 years in Puerto Rico and 3 years in Brazil, which was very fun experience, but of course with lots of challenges, as a spouse, as a French woman, also discovering new languages, new environments, and I thought it was exciting, but at some points also very, very hard, especially on a professional side.
Yeah, I bet. So you've really lived the expat life and you've gone into different countries and settled there.
Yeah.
So can I assume that you know all the difficulties that people are going to experience when they move country? And that's really your niche then, is helping people that
Yeah.
are here in France that have just moved or are thinking about moving.
Exactly. I've been through many challenges, and of course, it required me to adapt. And the faster you adapt, the easier it gets. But
Yeah,
adaptation requires that you make an effort. So it requires a lot of energy and also support. And confidence. So I think confidence. We'll talk about that, but it's the key also to integrate into a country and to want to go outside your house and meet people. It's
yeah.
but yeah,
Comfort zone,
Puerto
isn't
Rico
it?
is a beautiful island, and
Yeah,
France is one of the most beautiful countries in the world too. But Puerto Rico was quite hard for me. I didn't have a life project, a professional project, so it was very difficult. I felt very isolated. I didn't drive, so I wasn't living right by the beach, so I wouldn't go
yeah,
to the beach every day. And I actually found myself quite lonely. And even though I was living with my husband, yeah, I went through difficult times in Puerto Rico
yeah,
just to accept also and to then, start doing something with my life.
yeah.
Mm.
I think your journey and my journey have been similar in a way, but I think
Yeah.
yours perhaps more difficult because of the language. When I first left the UK, I went to South Africa,
Mm.
English. Then we moved to Ghana, English, and it's only really since we've come to France that different language has been perhaps the issue for us in a way. And it is tricky, and I often think people, myself included, underestimate how tricky it can be if you don't
Mm.
have even a basic level of French. Is that one of the barriers that you see most common?
Yes, it's one of the main barrier when people come into France, not thinking they might know a bit of French, but like I said, French has so many different variations. You might know, you live in the Southwest. It's not the French that we learn in books. There are so many
Yeah,
accents, so many ways to pronounce, and we abbreviate a lot. So it's what I teach. It's real French, everyday French, so people can communicate quickly. It can be very tricky, the language barrier and also, social connections. Every human needs social connections. And when you
yeah,
have to rebuild a whole network of friends or colleagues, or it can be quite difficult. Yeah, especially if there's a language barrier in addition. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely.
Mm.
And people get in touch with you and they say, "Hey, we're moving to France and we'd like some help and some guidance with XYZ." What do they usually think that France will be? What will France look like to them? And what's the sort of common misconceptions that you identify?
France is seen, I think, of course, like the country of gastronomy, of arts, and so many things to see. And if you go to Paris, obviously you'll be quite busy. Even Toulouse has so many options to offer. But not everyone lives in the center of a big city, or
Yeah,
um, there are many people who move to a rural area. And here in Toulouse, for example, the it's quite you can go outside Toulouse quite easily. Many people live, on the rural side, and if you don't drive, and if you end up, not being able to do those things, the option that the city has to offer. And that's one of, they expect, I guess, to meet many people, to enjoy the gastronomy and being able to communicate and buy bread at the bakery. But it's not enough, really. And people here can be a bit not cold, but we have different ways of communicating. When I lived in Puerto Rico, everyone would say hello at the bus stop, and everyone would ask you questions, be curious about yourself. And I've noticed myself in different contexts that people aren't so curious and not so willing to share things with you. We're quite kind of
yeah,
introverted when we know people. So the expectation would be, yeah, to meet people, to walk around the streets and, enjoy the French lifestyle, grab a coffee and croissant and so on. But when you do this by yourself, without any friends, or you do this once or twice, but it doesn't fill your whole day.
Yeah, yeah. That 30-minute trip to the boulangerie is only 30 minutes of your day, isn't it?
Yeah.
And do you see that quite often then? People think about the French dream, the rural lifestyle, the growing your own vegetables and having chickens. Do you see that where people make that mistake?
Yeah, there are so many, symbols of France that, the lavender fields, the baguette, the Tour Eiffel, the sunny side of Paris, and basically, yes, there are expectations and there's a reality. No country and is perfect, but if you arrive in the middle of winter in a small
Yeah,
village in Aveyron, or it's not the reality of a sunny Paris, with you walking around and having a good time. It's the reality, and people also are busy working or they have their own life. So for someone coming, as a spouse, or as a retiree and expecting to meet many people, it's not necessarily the case. People are busy with
yeah.
their own lives. So yeah, that can be tricky. Mm.
Isolation. I think that's one thing we've found.
Yeah.
The French dream for us was that, the house in the countryside, and it is lovely. But once our honeymoon faded, we also realized about reality and the village that we live nearby. Yeah, there's hardly anyone there in winter. It gets busy in summer, of course, but
Yes.
the little bar restaurant closes during winter. The
Mm.
boulangerie's open, but people are in and out. It's not the sort of place you hang around,
No.
because I mean, today, for example, it's cold, it's
Mm.
rainy, and what I find chatting to people that move here from all over the world is the climate is often something that perhaps they overlook or they
Mhm.
don't look into in as much detail. And, friends of mine in the UK say, "Oh, you live in the south of France." Yeah, but we have winter.
Mm.
It was snowing here a few weeks ago. It wasn't
Right.
heavy, thick snow, but it was cold enough. I think one morning when I took the girls to school, it was
Uh-huh.
so that's something I see people perhaps not considering enough. How do you chat to people about location then? Do you have a set format to say, you're moving to Paris, that's great, it's buzz,
Mm.
or are you moving to Nice and it's also exciting buzz, or are you moving to the countryside? Is that part of the process?
Well, yes and no, Mike. I usually, support people who are already in France or newcomers. They
Yeah.
maybe arrived a day ago or 2 months ago, but yeah, really newcomers. But if I have a recommendation to make to anyone, and it requires to know the person, to know what their needs are, what their lifestyle is, and to be really realistic and align, the needs with the real life. And Nice, the Côte d'Azur, the French Riviera is a beautiful place, but it's more expensive than most areas in France. It's busy in the summer. There are a lot of retirees there, which is depending, if that's what you want and need. It's great. It's sunny, so there are good sides and bad sides to every place in France. So yeah, I
Yeah.
think when recommending a place, it's important to know, what the values of the person are, what they're looking for. If they want to grow vegetable, if they want to grow a garden, vegetable garden, I wouldn't recommend them to move to the city of Nice, or, but a more rural
Yeah.
area like Gers, or, well, any other place in France.
Yeah.
But yeah, what do they really need? Do they want to meet people? Do they want to be alone? Or what's their life project, basically, when they retire, or when they work and want to do as a hobby or on the side, what are
Yeah.
they looking
It's a
for?
great phrase, isn't it? Life project.
Yes.
How did you come up with that, or does that make up a big part of your role? Is helping people with their life project?
Yes, of course. I use this word a lot because, and actually, I believe we don't have one life. We have several lives. There are different phases in life, your childhood, your professional life. Myself, I've had several with the years abroad, my years as an athlete or a competitive swimmer, and now my new life in Toulouse, but I think there are different phases, transitions in life that you need to apprehend and accept and prepare as well. So I use life projects for people coming to France. So, okay, either if they work or they don't, how are they going to spend their time here? What hobby? What is the project?
Yeah.
I used it for athletes, for career transition. You were very busy with your sport. What are you going to do when your career ends? This is a very important subject and not quite anticipated. And retirees, of course, you and I at one day will retire, Mike. I don't know myself what age, because France is complicated and there's a reform undergoing reform. But anyway, it's a phase that needs to be prepared, not only moving into a new country, of course, which needs preparation and anticipation, but what are you going to do, every day, 24 hours of your day,
Yeah.
when you don't have a job, when you don't have a purpose? What's your new purpose in life? You know,
Yeah.
it's a real project.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So people, they've moved to France, they've settled in, and then the reality sinks in and they go, blimey, there's a bit of a shock here. There's a bit of a
Yeah.
culture shock. There's a language shock. Perhaps there's
Right.
isolation. And they come to you. Describe what the process is from there.
I believe it's all about, knowing yourself, knowing what your needs are, if you're an artist, if you're more into sports. And a life project can be finding your hobbies aligned to yourself. Some people don't know each other, don't know themselves, sorry, very well. It can be you work your whole life, you're so busy, you raise kids, but basically, do you listen to your own needs? When
Yeah.
people retired, for example, if I take or even athletes, when they stop their career, they are in front, facing themselves for real and kind of wondering, who am I? What am I going to do?
Yeah.
What can I do? Especially, what can I do? It's
Yeah.
really interesting. So my approach is all about, knowing yourself and building confidence also that you can achieve something. If you prepare, if you do some thinking, you can find so many ideas for your life project.
So, yeah, in the next episode, we'll go a bit deeper into that and how those solutions can really help people with perhaps the next stage of their life project. And just going back onto the problems that people face, if I talk about our situation for a sec,
Mm,
one of the areas that I think my wife identified was how kids, our children, are going to adapt to life in France. Now, we were fortunate in a way that our girls were 4 and 5 when we came here, but I
mm,
think she's spoken to people and she's seen things on various Facebook groups about people moving with teenagers and how their life might have been in the UK
mm.
or somewhere else in the world. They've moved to France because of perhaps their parents or parents' work or whatever. How teenagers adapt, because they're obviously a bit
Mm.
older than mine were. That's something you work with quite regularly, is it?
Yes, I do. I mostly focus on adults, since I find that children and even teenagers adapt, easier. I mean, they're quite good at adapting and making new friends, for example, and they're not so conscious, self-aware. Okay, my French is not so good. They just want to
Yeah,
communicate. So, but it's true that it requires some skills, for both kids, teenagers, and adults. It's letting go and developing a sense of humor. Here we're focusing on difficulties of moving into a new country, but it's such an enrichment. You get to develop so many skills: adaptation, we talked about, resilience. And it's
yeah,
important as a family project to prepare, anticipate with the kids, discuss the expectations, maybe the difficulties, And I think it's really important to communicate within the family, to listen to the kids. Do they have new friends? How do they feel about not being fully bilingual yet? And usually in a few months, they do become quite fluent. But yeah, teenagers often have problems, especially if your kid is in troisième, ninth grade. There's an exam at the end of the year. There's a family here I'm supporting. The daughter completely lost confidence in herself because she has the brevet to prepare, which is an exam at the end of troisième, history, French, and here the school system is quite demanding. We have the grades. It's all about getting good grades and not necessarily helping you with when you have difficulties, and it's actually more demanding than maybe in the US or in some other countries I've been to. So it's all about supporting also teenagers, the family, helping them understand it's a process. It takes a bit of time, and eventually, they go over this difficulty and gain confidence again. Humor helps, of course. It's really accepting, adjusting expectations, and bringing support. We'll talk about solutions in the second episode, but there are many solutions that can be implemented to help
Yeah.
teenagers.
Yeah. It's interesting. We speak as financial planners. We speak to people every day about retirement,
Yeah.
and that word is it's a strange word, a strange concept for many people, because traditionally, I think it used to be based on an age, 60, 65. But I think the conversations I have daily with people is not about that age or that target, or it's about when
Mm-hmm.
and if and how. And one of the things I chat to people about who perhaps show a desire to leave their employment or slow down is phased retirement. Going down to 4 days a week, 3 days a week, 2 days a week, and
Mm.
it comes back to that word of purpose.
Yeah.
And I always think with people who perhaps, I don't know, 20, 30 years ago used to stop 65, that's it, done. Well, that's quite a tough transition. If you've worked from, I don't know, leaving school or university, maybe you've worked for 40 years,
Well,
9 to 5 every day, the same sort of people, routine, challenge, and all that. And then all of a sudden it's cold turkey. And I think a lot of people don't adapt very well to that. Do you
no.
find that people perhaps coming to France who have had this dream of retiring in France, does that give them that sort of cold turkey situation where they go, okay, now what?
Yeah, it can be very difficult on the couple as well. I mean, it's what's your purpose, your own purpose, and also your whole routine, your whole schedule is changed. So you need to adapt, and also the couple has to adapt, the family has to adapt. It's can be quite tricky. So definitely it needs some self-reflection. People need to anticipate, and you help them prepare, like go slow down, in their work schedule. But it's also identifying who you are, what you like doing, what you don't like doing, and
Yeah,
communicate, with your spouse about this new phase in your life also, because
yeah,
it's not the same,
yeah,
working all day and being then together 24/7. It's also what's my life project, my purpose in life, individually and also as a couple. If there's a couple,
yeah,
retiring at the same time, how are they gonna move forward, with their routine as well as a couple? So
yeah,
it's really interesting
yeah.
also.
Routine's a funny thing, isn't it? My wife read a lot about it when the kids were very young, that how good routine is for babies and toddlers, and absolutely. And I think it's the same for adults. I think it's the same for people, that we like routine. We like knowing the safety of knowing what we're doing day in, day out. But I suppose retirement
Mm,
is one area that throws a big curveball. Then I suppose moving country. And if
yeah.
you're doing both, if you're moving country and retiring, it's almost a double whammy in a way. So yeah, that purpose that people seek,
Mm,
it's often a tricky conversation I have with people. We deal with a lot of Americans that are moving to France, And I
Mhm.
was speaking to a couple maybe 2 weeks ago now, and they're both still working, and they've put a bit of a target for the end of this year to move. So stop working at the end of the
Mhm.
year and move to France to retire, all within the space of a month or two. And that's a big life change. Is that a typical person that you see and help?
Yes, yes, and many people more and more come to France. There was a wave of British, right, people after Brexit moving to France, and a lot of Americans come to retire to France. I've supported some people, couples or individuals moving, and they either had a project to have a guest house or just to enjoy life, but they did have a project, but then it doesn't necessarily cover the fact that you arrive into a new country and then you need to learn the language and to meet people, especially if you want to develop a business, not to earn money necessarily, but to fill your days. And it's
Yeah.
quite interesting, yeah, that they. I mean, my objective or my mission is to help them not get a routine. Routine doesn't have to be negative necessarily. It's reassuring, like you said. It's good to have some objectives or maybe some activities every day that you do or once a week. But yeah, I find that they come here with many expectations, many projects, and it takes more time than expected. We know also one of the difficulty here is the administrative system. The administrative system can be difficult. Retirees, they need to make sure they are covered, they have health insurance, and are quite integrated into the system as well. Nothing is translated here. The health insurance website, the impôt, the taxes website, nothing, and no one you can call on the phone, speaks English, so it can be quite difficult.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm back to the language barrier, but yeah, many difficulties, that can really lower your expectations or come in shock with your expectations.
And with all the people you've dealt with over the past few years, is there a common theme that they might say, I wish I'd known this before I moved to France, or I wish someone had told me, or an area where they say, I wish I'd got some help with that? Is there one that sort of sticks out or sticks in your mind?
Yeah, I talk a lot about the language barrier, but Happy in France has a really holistic approach. The culture, understanding the cultural codes, the how the system works, how France works, is very important. Yesterday, I was talking to an American lady I'm supporting about bank holidays. How you can't go to a supermarket on Labor Day
Yeah.
or even on a Sunday. It doesn't necessarily have to be a bank holiday. And also the greetings, how we greet people, how we meet people, we make friends, all the cultural codes. I always tackle those issues as they come. It's not like a course I deliver or everything that you need to learn about France. Some people are going to maybe focus on this part, find it difficult depending on their culture, of course, and education. It's not necessarily where you come from, what your nationality is. It's also your education, your background, your life experiences that
Yeah.
make you have a different approach or different vision of this new environment you're discovering. So we also need to adapt to every person we support. And I have many examples, yeah, of the culture. People told me, oh, we went to not Toulouse, because Toulouse has many options as restaurants, but we wanted to grab lunch at 3 p.m. on a Saturday, and we didn't find any open restaurants.
Yeah.
In the US, you can eat 24/7. You have, well, so many examples of, yeah, things we do differently here. It's not necessarily better or worse. It's just
Yeah.
different. And I like to help people also understand and on different topics how it works, give them tips, advice on how to register to free courses, how to register to, yeah, sport activities for themselves, for their kids. It's, yeah, this is also the kind of support people need.
No, it's funny because when we arrived in Toulouse to have a look around a few years ago. We arrived on a Saturday. We were living in South Africa, and we flew up, and we arrived on the Saturday, and everything was open. It was great. And then we'd rented a place actually in Pau. So, a couple of hours away. We'd rented an Airbnb house. And so we had the breakfast in the morning at the hotel, and then we left. And on the way there, we said, "Oh, we'll maybe stop for lunch and then go to the supermarket, and then fine." Now, of course, nothing was open, and we'll find a supermarket closed. Oh, maybe we'll go to another one closed. And so the only thing we had on that Sunday to get us through, we found a McDonald's that was open. And at first you think, hang on a minute, the kids loved it. And my wife and I were saying, we didn't come to France for McDonald's. But actually what we really have grown to love over the past 5 years of living in France is that nothing is open on a Sunday, apart from McDonald's. And it sort of forces you to spend time at home, or spend time with your family or friends, doing things, walking in the countryside, or for me, it's a lot of gardening, usually on a Sunday. But it's actually really nice. And coming from the UK, pardon me, coming from like the UK and coming from South Africa and like you say, the States, everything's open 24/7.
Right.
But actually, it's one of those cultural things here that we've actually grown to really like.
Yeah.
So there you go. That's my McDonald's story.
No, but it's true. Going to a restaurant, it requires some planning. Even on a
Yeah,
Saturday
yeah.
evening, if you want to go at a restaurant in Toulouse, you need to book, and you need to. So it's not something. Okay, just walk around, enter a restaurant, and grab dinner. It's
Yeah, absolutely. So in the next episode, Matilda and I are going to talk about how you actually build a life in France. And it's not just about surviving the move. Just so I don't pronounce your name wrong.
Mathilde Baudu.
Okay, Mathilde.
Mathilde. Oui, Mathilde. Ouais, Mathilde Baudu. Mathilde.
I've been having my French lessons this week, and he's been picking me up on my pronunciation. So I'm trying.
The silent E's, which are not so silent.
Oh my God.
Especially in Occitanie, Mathilde. That's how we do.
Yeah, Mathilde.
Yeah.
We were doing countries this week, and Sénégal, du Sénégal.
En France.
I don't know when I'll need the word Senegal, but I know it now.
Yeah.
Really low. You want me to sit up, or can I prefer? I can slouch. I'm good at slouching. Let's go.
What?
More energy, more passion.